Today I'm going to talk about the rendering process that we're going to do for project number 2. This is the reflective surfaces rendering. We've done our sketch, and I'm going to talk about the contour line drawing and transferring that. That would be the second layer, the refined drawing. Transferring that to Canson paper. I'm going to use a dark gray Canson paper. You could either use a medium gray Canson paper for this, and that would be a steel gray or a felt gray or maybe a flannel gray. Those are all mid-value gray Cansons. Good surface and good value. I'm going to use a dark gray. I think it's a little bit more dramatic. It shows up the reflections a little bit better. I've tried both and I kind of like both, but I'm going to use the dark gray for this demonstration anyway. First we're going to talk about transferring the drawing to the Canson paper, so we'll get started with that. Okay, for transferring, I've got a contour line drawing that I did on tracing paper right on top of my initial sketch. It was a refined sketch that I showed you in the last demonstration, video demonstration. So this is the contour line drawing that went with that, or that was drawn on top of that. So I'm ready to transfer now. This is going to be a much easier way to transfer, I think. If you're using the dark paper, I'm using white, I believe it's white pastel. It's kind of hard to tell because it's all worn down and there's no name on it anymore. This is all that's left of it. I put it everywhere, all over the drawing. Rubbed it in pretty well, and then I took my finger to it, and I think you can see the white reflection of the chalk on here. So that was on the back of my contour line drawing, right? So I'm going to turn it right side up and tape it down in a couple of places on the top. Most important thing to remember with composition is remember to put registration marks down for your composition, where that's going to go. And then you can take your ruler, there's a pastel underneath there, and just go ahead and redraw that and all four corners. I've got my tape at the top so that I can lift it up at any time and see what I've transferred and make sure that it's transferring okay. So I'm not going to do the whole thing here, but I'm going to get you started on it just to take a look. So I've got a different color pencil. I actually did a layer of blue, indigo blue previously, and this is a black. So it shows up just a little bit better. And what I'm basically doing is just going over all of my line, my contour line, with the white pastel in the back, which transfers pretty easily onto the Canson paper. Okay, so let's take a look and see how it's going. So you can probably barely see that, and that's okay as long as you can see it, because I'm going to talk about going back over it in a minute here. So I've got my transferred line here. I went back over it very, very lightly, softly, I should say, with a pretty sharp white Prismacolor pencil. And I don't want to heavily outline it. I wouldn't do this with black, I don't want to do it with white. But if it's pastel or Conti Crayon, when you start putting marker on it, which I'm going to do next, your transfer line might just disappear. So we want to keep some of it behind, and it shouldn't be really super bright. It should just be there so that you can see it. So I'm just barely going over it. Very important, remember, there's two sides to the Canson paper. That's the side that you want. The side that you don't want is that holy kind of texture that you get when you're on, I won't call it the wrong side because some people like that, but not so much for a rendering. It just kind of like just distracts. So we have a texture, but it's not a really strong, it's a very organic texture. So just to encourage you to use the right side, remember that, okay? All right, so I'm transferred to Canson. I've got tape around my borders, which you should do. Remember the sketch we're shooting for is around 14 by 17. I came in about an inch or so all the way around because I didn't need all that negative space. You want to have a couple of inches easily as a border. There's about an inch and a half on my shortest side here, but I've got a couple of inches almost everywhere else around here, and that's fine. Okay, so we're ready to start the rendering process, and we're going to do the first layering, and the first part of the process is going to be with gray marker, and I'm going to use these Prismacolor markers. I'm not going to use a whole set. You don't need to use a whole set. You could probably get by with 4, maybe 5, including black. And that's what I'm going to do with this rendering, because I said it could be done, and you might not have enough money to buy a whole set, but you can probably afford to buy 4 or 5. So I'm going to use a 20, 40, 60, 80 in a black. And you can see that the 20, I think you can see that. Maybe you can't see that because it's really super light. So for this rendering, on dark gray paper, I'll probably start with a 40. If I was using a mid-value gray Canson paper, I'd definitely start with a 20%. But I'm going to start with a 40%, see how that goes, and if I need to soften some of my edges or blend it in a little bit, I've got a 20 that I can use. Okay, so we're going to start that rendering process right now. Okay, I'm going to start with 4. Number 4, this is a neutral gray marker. I'm going to use neutral grays for this project. You could use cools, warms, or neutrals, but don't mix them up. Can't make it lighter. You can use white pencil later, but we're going to layer it so that we can start with a 40%. It's pretty safe place to start. I like to use a piece of cardboard for long strokes. Just make sure that you're going in the right direction. Long strokes like this, you can do it freehand too. This marker feels like it's drying up a little bit. I've got another set. You do want some nice juicy markers, but at the same time, it's kind of nice to have some markers that are, if not drying, they're a little less than very fluid, so that you can use them softly like this. So I'm going to go ahead and block in the largest areas that I see. There's some reflections in there. I'm not going to worry about where the white is. The white is going to be put on later with pastel and colored pencil. So all I really want to do is just get this to go on pretty smoothly. You can do circular strokes. You can do linear strokes. You can use this for, just make sure you're going in the right direction. So my direction in the middle would be something like this. And I can see some reflections in here of the glass ball and jar. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in now. So this is going to take me the longest amount of time to do. This is going to be, the lightest value is going to take up the most time because it's the foundation value. So I'm going to skip ahead now and then because I'm going to try to limit this to about 15 total minutes to go through all 4, at least 4 layers of different gradations of markers. Still on my first layer, I've gotten a little farther along, about 15, 20 minutes worth anyway. Usually use the fat tip because it can do pretty much the same thing that the skinny tip will do. It's just that the skinny tip won't do nice, large, flat areas. So once in a while, I'll pull this off and use the skinny tip, but normally I like to use the fat tip. There we go. Markers are great because they soak right into the surface of the Canson paper. You can see that it's much lighter. I don't know if you remember, but there's my marks right now. It has lightened up considerably. So this is going to be probably my lightest value of the ones that I'm going to use. So I would say that I'm just about done with my first marker, which is the 40% gray, and I'm ready for my next one, which is 60%. So I'm going to keep the 4 handy because I'm going to show you a very good trick as you're using the 6. But I'm just going to go ahead and put in the darkest values that I see that don't have sort of a blend. The darkest values are going to be probably 80%, maybe even a little bit of black, but the next darkest values. Okay, so I can see those, and those are the ones that I want to get first, the easiest ones. So here's an easy, fairly easy one here. So this is 60%. Okay. And markers are great because they're great for detail. They can give you a lot of detail. This is going to take a while, but again, my 40% being the lightest value, that's the one that really takes the longest because that's your foundation. As you move through the darker values, you're going to go less and less time. So I've seen some objects that are reflected in there, and I've just drawn them in with my marker, and I'm going to be subtle with these values. It's going to lighten up quite a bit, but these are some of my darkest values in here. I'm going to leave a lot of paper surface and 40% gray, but if I didn't keep going with this, it would look pretty boring. So still working with my second marker, and that would be the 60%, number 6. And just blending it in, I'm seeing structure and I'm seeing things reflected in there, and I'm kind of accenting them as I go. And not worried about where the white's going to go, but if there's lighter areas, leaving those open, like the ones over on this side, they're still a little bit lighter. And then coming into the body, I see reflections, I see a tabletop, things like that are accented by darker values. I'm trying to simplify it too. I'm not trying to show a whole little world inside there, even though there might be. It might be confusing. So I'm trying to keep that part of it simple. Again, I'm going to use a piece of cardboard to get long, straight. Just make sure you're going in the right direction. There's plenty of that over here. Kind of overlaps some of these other strokes and blends it in pretty well. So this is all very dark over here, so I can feel free to put most of this in, just not really flat, but mostly dark. Always going in the direction that the object is going.